So Sergio Perez signs a 2-year deal with Red Bull. A 2-year deal. That has surprised so many people. So I really want to get into this. Why a 2-year deal? 1-year deal was surprising enough for some. Why Perez? Was there anybody else? What does it mean to Red Bull? And is it going to hurt Red Bull or help Red Bull more in the future? And is it going to hurt or help Max Verstappen more in the future? We will get into this. What is a really interesting signing, arguably one of the most interesting signings or re-signings since Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the Hot Lap. So we are talking Sergio Perez, a 2-year deal. And there's a really interesting article. We did a whole live stream about it a few hours ago. But if you just want to have a slightly quicker video to get what we think down, carry on watching. But the motorsport.com article, it started saying a new 2-year deal for Sergio Perez. First of all, congratulations, Sergio Perez. You are continuing to be employed in a really good / one of the best Formula One teams. But this 2-year deal shows Red Bull's intention to maintain the status quo. But, however, question marks over whether the Mexican, as in Sergio Perez, has done enough to earn his extension are likely to persist, especially if the team's worst fear is realised. And that's the words of Kevin Turner when he speaks about the issues, potentially, with Red Bull. So I think the fact that he was signed for at least a year may not be the biggest surprise. Some people may have been like, well, why didn't he go for other options? But 2 seasons, which means his tenure at the team will come to a total of 6, is a surprise. I think the fact that it's 2. He is alongside one of the best drivers of the generation. And I think there's a very strong case that could be made for it potentially being the wrong move for Red Bull. Yes, you can make an argument there's a case for it being the right move for Red Bull. From a neutral fan's point of view, I think you want to change things up. A lot of people were hoping for a Carlos Sainz in at Red Bull. In fact, that was one of the many rumours as to why Carlos hadn't signed for Williams or Audi. Was he holding out for that Red Bull seat? But, as we know, Red Bull potentially isn't the dominant force it was in the second half of 22 and at 2023. And recent evidence suggests that the field is going to be catching up. You just look at Ferrari at the time of recording after the Monaco Grand Prix, they are just 4 points behind Red Bull in that Constructors' Championship. So, are we being a bit harsh on Perez, though, saying, there's possibly more reasons for them not to sign? Having said that, Red Bull do have access to more information than us. Maybe they've seen something they haven't. But what Motorsport.com alludes to is the Super Times matrix, and they're suggesting that Perez is the second worst performing driver compared to his teammate. The only other one that's worse is Logan Sargent at Williams. Super Times are based on a single lap-by-lap driver at each race weekend, expressed as a percentage of the fastest single lap overall, for example 100%, and averaged over the season. In other words, This super lap thing is essentially shows how fast your teammate is. And that's something that I really, really want to, something I'd be really interesting to get into. In fact, so much so that I think, like the live stream, I am most certainly going to share with you the super time. So the closest guys, here we go, up for a laugh. Ocon and Gasly, as in Ocon going first. So Ocon's the leader, but at 0.051 of a gap, you're talking about 0.05 of a second. Just shy of a tenth is McLaren's Norris and Piastri, and then Russell and Hamilton just over a tenth. But you have to go. I mean, even Tsunoda Ricciardo's three tenths. Leclerc, Sainz, 3.5 tenths. I was quite surprised actually, because Sainz has been having a really solid year, but you've got to go all the way down to 9th. Nearly 6.5 tenths of a second. Verstappen over Sergio Perez. Facts. I mean, that's deniable, isn't it? And they're saying that some will argue that Verstappen is a tough benchmark, and seeing as the Dutchman is already becoming potentially one of the F1 greats, that's true. But they're saying this overlooks 2 things. And they're saying the first is the top teams, they tend to employ drivers that you've always going to come up against the best at the front, and Perez is not alone having a tough colleague. The other is that no driver, however brilliant, can take a car faster around the circuit than it can go. They're quoting physics. The best might get to 99%. So, yeah, and Perez's gap to Verstappen and raw speed has been pretty consistent. They're suggesting this isn't about one of the much discussed Perez's off his game moments. I mean, when you look at 2021, the gap was 0.7% behind. In 2022, it was 0.54%, and in 2023, 0.761% behind, which isn't too bad at all, if you think about it. And I've just realised I think their percentage is not fastest, slowest super times gap in seconds. No, it's in seconds. So I digress. Please ignore that. So Perez's gap to Verstappen is sizable, and I'll make a point here. You look at, for example, Nico Rosberg, Hamilton. Yes, it was a bit toxic. They were very close to each other. Then you look at Lewis Hamilton, for example, and Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri was able to beat Hamilton probably more times than Sergio could beat Max. Does that make Valtteri better than Perez? Potentially. And you could make it, there's a very good argument to be made. In 2021, it is felt by a lot of people that Red Bull just about had the better car compared to the Mercedes, and yet it was Valtteri that ended up scoring more points than Sergio Perez. And it really wasn't until the last race where Sergio Perez, and I think Turkey, the Ministry of Defence, they were saying, held up Lewis Hamilton really, 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 really well. And to show you how good a number two can do, you could almost, in a way, put the blame on Valtteri Bottas as to why Lewis Hamilton did not win the 2021 Abu Dhabi. Yeah, Michael Massey aside. Hear me out. And this is an example of why you need a really, really good teammate. So you've got Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, the safety car comes out, and it allowed Max Verstappen to pit because not at the point no one knew whether the race was going to carry on. But it allowed Max Verstappen to pit. Had Lewis Hamilton pit, Max Verstappen would have done the opposite. Hamilton would have come out behind Max Verstappen. Facts. But had Valtteri Bottas been doing his number two role better, a decent number two role, he should have been close enough, really. I mean, you've got, arguably the second best car at least. And he should have been close enough to Max that when that safety car was announced, that Max couldn't pit because he would have come out behind Valtteri Bottas. Ergo, whatever happened there, Lewis Hamilton potentially would have won the World Championship had Valtteri Bottas been a better number two. Maybe that's a bit harsh, but that's an example of how good a number two you can be. Imagine at Canada, for example. As we know, there is this 2/3 gap quite often between Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, sometimes more. Now, whilst that 2 or 3 tenths gap in 22 and 23, yeah, you got the best car, so you're going to be second or third. But even that 2 or 3 tenths gap now, you're looking at the difference sometimes between now first 2 or 3 tenths and maybe fifth or sixth, and it's all those cars in between. For example, your McLarens and your Ferraris and maybe the odd Mercedes, where Perez isn't out qualifying and maybe not out racing. That's going to hurt Red Bull in those constructors championships. And this is also a driver. He's a lovely, I'm sure Sergio Perez is a lovely guy, but I'm just basing it, if I was a team boss, Sergio Perez in the best car in 2022 didn't finish second in the championship. In 2023, Max alone could have, I think, won the constructors championship. And Perez, let's be fair, he did struggle a bit to get into second, and this was a car that won every race but one, and that was the one in Singapore. And Perez had a nightmare. If you remember Japan and other races, it just wasn't going really, really well, which is why I'm surprised they've signed Perez for 2 years. I mean, is it going to be 2 years of promise, or is it going to be 2 years of pain? I mean, and even Motorsport.com and other journalists are saying that you could argue speed isn't Perez's greatest strength. He's better at the races, but even there, he can rarely get close to Max Verstappen. And Max Verstappen knows how to look after tyres, but that's something that Sergio Perez, the tyre whisperer, used to be able to do as well. And it was just not very good at all. I mean, yes, he is a number two. And Perez, when you look at 2021 again, he just scored 48% of Verstappen's total. Just 48%. He did improve to 67 and 22, but then fell to 50%. Against Verstappen's awesome score last year. But that's, I don't think that's still enough. He wasn't finishing second and third for Red Bull even in 2023 as consistently as he should have been. which is once again why I'm really flabbergasted as to why Sergio Perez has signed for 2024 and 2025. Now, first of all, why do you think that is? Well, he was one of the few people that came out and supported Christian Horner. So maybe Horner, in the whole WhatsApp, etc., you know, the allegation, which Horner denies, is that maybe one of the reasons that Horner feels a certain loyalty towards him? Perhaps. Could it be that they don't want to rock the apple cart because Max Verstappen has been making sounds about maybe leaving the team, and they know Max? I mean, him and Perez aren't really best friends. Max has come out and said he's happy, but yeah, okay, Max. You're happy. Are you happy because, you can beat him? Kind of like a Valtteri Bottas Lewis Hamilton scenario. And he won't really upset the apple cart. But where is, if you put somebody else in, maybe you would. And then, understandably, Max Verstappen, one of the best drivers of the generation, they want to keep him happy. They want to keep him in the team, particularly for 2026. Because if the Honda with Honda leaving and that Ford engine maybe not being particularly as good as the others, you're going to need a driver like a Max Verstappen to maybe make a difference. If he can, he can. He's one of those drivers where if you need a couple of tenths, for example, we go back to that Imola pole position that he took. That really, Red Bull did not on earth look like they'll be taking pole position, but yet Max did, and it was absolutely fantastic. Sergio Perez has had amazing pole positions and amazing races. If you remember early last year in 2023, he was as fast as Max at some places, and then Max needed to unlock something within the car, but he was, he can be as fast as Max. He's just not consistent enough. And there's an argument that you can say he makes too many mistakes. And it may, as I've already suggested, it may cost Red Bull in that Constructors' Championship. But maybe they've said, we'd rather keep Max happy, win the drivers, and maybe finish second or third in the Constructors and stomach that. That is interesting. And in that respect, now that Sergio Perez has signed the 2-year deal, he's alleviated a lot of the pressure. But you can also make an argument that he's now put a lot of the pressure on him simply because now people are going to be really looking at him now he's signed that 2-year deal. And I really hope, what he needs to do, and it would be great if he just comes out in Canada and beats Max Verstappen. Now he's got all that confidence in Canada, and beats Verstappen and wins the Canadian Grand Prix. What a statement that would be. Absolutely, driver of the race, etc. That would be fantastic. Will he? I don't know, but it's going to be really interesting to watch between now and the end of the season, and see how what Sergio Perez is going to do. Anyway, this has been the Hot Lap. Like and subscribe if you can. If you want to see more F1 content, we've got the Canadian Grand Prix coming up. We'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much.